In this video, we're going to talk about the first routine in SQL PSM, which is the procedure. A procedure is a routine that does not return values and may take parameters, and it must be called explicitly. So the syntax for a procedure is going to look like this. First, we're going to specify the change in the delimiter, and then last, we're going to reset the delimiter. Then the code between, we're going to say create procedure, and then the name of the procedure. So there are three types of parameters that we can pass in the procedure. We can pass an in variable, an out variable, or an in-out variable. So an in variable means that we're going to pass in a value, and then when the procedure is done, that in variable is going to return back to the original value. It's not going to change even if the procedure changes that value. The out variable does not have a starting value, but it will come out of the procedure with a value if it's been changed in the procedure or set in the procedure. An in-out variable is going to allow us to pass in an existing value, and then if that value is changed in the procedure, it will leave the procedure as the new value. So we're going to say in variable name, out variable name, or in out variable name. For the purposes of this class, in is going to be sufficient. Then we're going to specify the data type of this variable. So for example, the data type may be integer, and then I can have a comma separated list of as many parameters as I need. And then we're going to begin the code and declare our variables, cursors, or constants. To call a procedure, we specifically use the word call. So we're going to say call and then the name of the procedure, and then any variables we're going to pass in. So these variables are going to match up to the parameters that we previously defined with our in-out variables. So for example, if I were to ask you to create a procedure that updates the price of all products by a specified percentage chosen by the user, and then call this procedure to increase all products' prices by 10% and display the new prices, the procedure would look like this. We would first change the delimiter, then we'd create the procedure, we'd name it price_update. What we're going to be passing into this is a percentage. So the user, for example, is going to provide a percentage of 10. So we're going to have an in variable, and I like to use v in front of the variable name so that I know that this is a variable that's been passed in. And then the data type is going to be a double 10 too, because percentages are in decimals. So we're going to then begin our code. We'll write a query that will change the percentage of the price. So we'll say update product set price equal to the price times 1 plus the percentage that was passed into the procedure as a parameter. Then we're going to select the description price from product. So the procedure is going to run both of these queries. It's going to update the price, and then it's going to show me the results from the product table so that I can see the price change of all of our products. Then to call this procedure, I'm going to say call price update and then pass in 0.1. Alright, so here we are back at the server. I've gone ahead and copied the code over. I'm going to go ahead and run this procedure. So I've gone ahead and run it, and now it says the procedure was successfully created. And you'll notice there's a procedures and functions tab. If I go ahead and click here, we see the price update procedure, and we can click on this to see the code that was used to create that procedure. Now what I'm going to do is run this call price update of 0.1. But before I do this, let's go ahead and look at our product table. So in the table data, we see that the first price is 175 and then 200. So let's go ahead and run this query, and it says that it successfully executed, and then it actually shows me that the prices have been increased. So the 175 has been increased by 1750, the 200 has been increased by 20, and so on. So now I want you to attempt this learning activity. So try these two procedures on your own. Pause this video and then come back to compare your answers. Alright, so I've gone ahead and copied these questions over and I've commented them out. So let's go ahead and answer this first one. This first one asks us to create a procedure named null report. So the first thing that I'm going to do is specify the delimiter. So I'm going to say delimiter $$, and then we'll reset the delimiter. So I'll say delimiter semicolon. Then I'm going to go ahead and create the procedure. So we say create procedure, and then we'll give the name of the procedure null report. And this procedure is going to display all customers that don't have a zip code specified in the state provided by the user. So we are going to pass in a variable of state, and this is going to be a char2. And then we will begin and end our procedure, and inside of this procedure we're going to show all customers that don't have a zip code specified in the state provided by the user. So we're going to select star from the customer table where zip code is null and state equals vstate. So vstate is what's passed in by the user, and I'll be able to pass in that and see what results are returned. So I'm going to go ahead and create this procedure. So we can see that the procedure was successfully created. So now let's go ahead and call this procedure. So we're going to say call null report, and then I'm going to pass in a state, and in this case we're asked to pass in the state of New Mexico. So I'll go ahead and run this, And we can see that our results return a total of one row of one customer that does not have a zip code that resides in New Mexico. All right, this next query asks us to create a procedure called new payment that inserts a new payment and displays the remaining balance on the provided order. We're supposed to then call this procedure using the following in parameters of order ID, payment type ID, the payment date, the amount, and the comment. So let's go ahead and look at our tables, specifically the payment table, and we see that there are 6 columns, and each one of these correspond to one of our in parameters except for the payment ID, which will auto increment. So we're going to go ahead and start by specifying our delimiters. So we're going to change it to $$, and then we'll change it back. And then we'll go ahead and create our procedure. So I'm going to say create procedure, new payment, and then for in parameters, we have a v order ID of an integer. We have another in parameter of payment type ID, so I'm going to say v payment type ID, and this is an integer. We have another in parameter of v payment date, and I'm going to have this be a date data type. Then we have another in parameter of v amount, and this is going to be a 662, as you can see on the right side. That's what we have for this field. And then this last in parameter is going to be vComment with a data type of varchar 255, as you can also see on the right side. Then we will begin and end our procedure with $$ at the end. All right, in between begin and end, we're going to do 2 things. We're going to do an insert query, which is going to insert into payment, and the columns we're going to insert into are order ID. We're going to skip payment ID because the auto increments, payment type ID, payment date, amount, and comment. The values that we're going to use are going to be supplied from the in parameters. So I'm going to say v order ID, v payment type ID, v payment date, v amount, and v comment. So after I insert into the payment table, I'm going to then select the information to find the remaining balance. So I'm going to select order ID, and to get the remaining balance, I need to get the sum of all subtotals minus the sum of all payments for a specific order. So I'm going to say the sum of price times quantity minus, and then I'm going to select the sum of amount, and I'm going to move this over a little bit so we can see what's happening. And this is going to come from the payment table, and I'm interested where order ID equals the order ID that is provided, so v order ID. I will give this an alias as remaining balance. Move this over just a little bit more. And I will need the order line table to get order ID and quantity, and to get the price, I'll need the product table. So I'm going to say from order line OL inner join product P on OL dot product ID equals P dot product ID. And again, I'm only interested in those with an order ID of what's provided from the in variable. So I'm going to say where order ID equals v order ID. And then finally, since I have a non-aggregated column with aggregated results, I'm going to use the group by clause. So I'll say group by order ID. So let's go ahead and run this query. And it says the procedure was successfully executed. So now let's go ahead and call it. So we'll say call new payment, and I'm going to pass in all the in variables. So order ID of 51 per the question description, payment type ID of 1, payment date, let's use today's date, so cur date, amount of 500, and card as the comment. We'll go ahead and run this query, and it shows us the order ID and the remaining balance of $2,815. So we discounted 500, so let's run this again, and we can see that it continues to discount the remaining balance by $500, as you can see every time I run it.